Hi everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite. So yeah, just quickly on Datch. You can think of Datch as an intelligent voice AI for industrial applications. So we mostly work with enterprises across the mining, utilities, manufacturing spaces. But there's many relevant verticals for what we do. Basically, one of the big frustrations you see in industry is the time spent on business processes. These are compulsory processes being done by everyone on the front line every day, all over a plant or a factory or a site. And our solution isn't just to get rid of the keyboard, but to use with your site and then use those conversations to ultimately drive industrial intelligence. So quick example, you're an engineer, you're doing an inspection of a conveyor belt, you come across an issue. All you need to do is say, hey, Datch, create a work order for the line 6 conveyor. There's a vibration issue that's affecting production. Assign the work order to Dave for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. and set the status to open. And then Datch takes all that information, breaks everything down, puts everything into the right categories, and then sends that information through to your existing ERP or asset management system. I'll leave it there, but happy to take any questions around that.
Great. And Carolyn, can you please give us a brief overview of Blue Bear?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I'm Carolyn Funk. I'm an investor at Blue Bear Capital. We invest in the digital side of what we call the energy supply chain, and I'll explain that a little more in detail. So we're all seeing the transition in the energy sector that we're going through. There are multiple things happening at the same time. One is the just transition from carbon-based fuels to more renewable fuels. Then there's the transition from centralized energy generation to more distributed generation. And then there's a transition of the workforce, basically bringing the workforce in the energy and industrial side to the 21st century with topics like what Mark just talked about, using your mobile phone instead of a keyboard, using data, AI, IoT, instead of pen and paper, and just worker knowledge. So we invest in all of that. Our focus is on companies that are at the early growth stage. So if you have first customer revenue, then you're right for us. And we really foster growth through our network, which is largely from the private equity space, and help companies grow faster than they could on their own. And Mark and I'm sure we'll get more into that during our talk.
Great. And, I'd love to hear about how you guys met. I believe it was at Plug and Play. So I'd love to hear just a little bit about how the relationship began.
Yeah, I can start this off because I tried to chase Mark down. I think it was last September, October, just about a year ago, at a more energy-focused event at Plug and Play. And I saw the pitch, and then this was in a different world when we're still at the Plug and Play Tech Center, and there were little tables with name tags and not as easily accessible as here in the virtual world where you see where people are. So I stopped by at the table trying to meet up with Mark because we've been looking into basically augmented reality for a long time for the industrial space. And I think voice is just one part of augmented reality, if you will. And so at the table, it was Ben, Mark's co-founder, and Mark wasn't there. And we started chatting and found out that we both had worked at Siemens in our past, that I'm from Germany. Ben spent some time in Germany. He spoke some German. He dusted up his German to keep me at the table while waiting for Mark. And eventually time went by, and all three of us hung out there for a little while afterwards.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where you finish the talk and then there's about 30 different people that want to talk to you all at once, and then so I just disappeared, got Ben to man the table, come back, he's speaking in German, which is he'll find any excuse to. So it was a good way to keep you there while I was doing some other stuff.
Great. And, Mark, I'd love to hear about who are some of the key stakeholders that you are working with within your customers. Who are you looking to work with?
Yeah, it's a good question. We really, you can kind of divide it into three different areas. So, we act on the front line, so we operate on the front line. So we're being used by the end user is the frontline worker, but we don't go and sell to them. They're very, very hard to get into contact with, and they don't necessarily have any decision-making authority. And so when it comes to chasing down, catching up with a particular company and having a chat to them and getting the deal through, we need to think about the frontline workers, but we also need to think about that middle management who interact with both some of the key decision makers up higher up, but also have a lot of interaction with the frontline workforce, so they understand the pain point. So folks like maintenance managers, operations managers, engineering managers tend to really see the need for so point that the frontline workers experience, and that's getting knowledge and capturing in a detail. But then when it really comes to decision making, often we'll end up talking to VP of operations or people in the sort of up there in the decision making side of things, where they're more focused on how do they get that knowledge from the front line, structure that knowledge, and then make use of that knowledge as well. So get the insights from work order data or maintenance data or engineering production data as well. So really, we've got to bring those together. The frontline workers aren't usually part of the decision making, but we definitely like to bring them in as early as possible to get that buy-in, because at the end of the day, the conversion happens when they adopt the product and not when they get told to use the product and nothing else.
Great. And, Carolyn, how do you go? You have quite the extensive background in the energy sector. How do you go about helping Mark in the Datch team throughout the process if someone on the sale and during the sales cycle goes silent?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually we have a couple of examples, not just with Datch, but in our broader portfolio. Through our the Bluebear team has constant conversations with the strategic stakeholders in the broader ecosystem, not just energy, but really infrastructure. If it's from the large conglomerates or even folks in the oil and gas space or utilities. And so if we feel or if we hear that this one contact has gone silent, we try to come in at a different level and figure out what is going on. So one example was with Datch, things were kind of not really moving forward, and one of my coworkers worked at the same company that Datch was trying to get into, and we just figured out what were the roadblocks in a very open conversation without having Datch on the phone, and then we can circle back and kind of reopen the door. And I think now Datch is invited to a Digital Innovation Day with the same company, and they kind of have a fresh shot at things. Other examples are just when people are leaving, and I've seen that, having worked on this at a startup myself. You think that the startup is a fast-moving environment, but then you're working with corporates and your champion is jumping around and all of a sudden not in that role anymore that is relevant for you, maybe not even in that group anymore. So finding new champions to kind of keep the conversation going. We just had that happen with a company, with a utility in Texas, where we were like, oh, dang, this one person's gone. Who else do we know? Bluebear kind of cranked through the Rolodex, and now they're able to take the conversation up where they stopped and you don't have to start from scratch again, because that takes so much time in a startup. You're just mostly resource restricted.
Yeah. And just to add to that, for us, it's we can it's really important for a startup sort of at our stage, so seed stage. We're still building out our channels and parts of our go-to-market, and it's really good to have a lead investor that is really well connected. It definitely helps not just fill any gaps, but actually really boost that pipeline as well. And for us, I talked about those two levels, sort of that middle manager level that really feel the pain point, but sometimes they're convinced this is what we need, this is exactly what we've been looking for, but they don't necessarily have that decision-making authority, and they often can't organization that can make that decision. So what we do is we identify these companies, then we talk to Blue Bear, and they say, yeah, we know someone in the in the innovation space, or we know someone who works in operations in this area at the VP level. And then we can really, connect the dots and get the right stakeholders on board as well.
Great. And now we have a question from the audience. How easy is it to implement Datch? Do you need customized devices to utilize, or can we use existing devices?
Yeah, good question. It depends on what level of implementation you're looking for. So there's the option to go for basically our out-of-the-box workspace package, where you can get up and running, no integrations required or anything like that. You can use device in terms of hardware, Android or iOS devices, and if you have a noisy environment, you can couple that with Bluetooth headsets as well, so that noise doesn't become a problem. Then we also have the ability to go in and integrate with ERP systems such as SAP or IBM Maximo to really get you that end-to-end solution, where you just talk through that process as you're working, and then that ends up as
great. And then I'd love to hear just a question about, as you guys were going through the due diligence process with each other, how did you guys reference check each other? Did Mark, were you able to talk to colleagues as well, or was it just kind of a one-way where she did reference checks? That
you should always do your due diligence. What really brought it up, we had a number of investors that we were and what we decided to really value was that network. So especially because we're dealing with enterprise customers, it's really important to have access, find different ways to get access to the right decision makers. And so we were able to kind of stress test it. The great thing about Blue Bear is they don't hold off on making introductions while they're doing that due diligence. They were throwing introductions to us before we'd even signed a term sheet. So that was a big part of the diligence. Well, definitely helped with the diligence for us, but we were also chatting with some of their other portfolio companies to make sure that what they were promising was what they were delivering, and really helped us build that confidence.
That's great to hear. And then we have a quick question from the audience. In regards to conversations that may have gotten lost due to a stakeholder leaving, where do you draw the line? And have you ever had to call off the engagement and shift efforts somewhere else?
Obviously, if the business is just going in a different direction, if the customer has made a different selection for a vendor or such, of course we will leave them in peace at one point. But or if there's just need for more time to get kind of bringing on board someone new to own that relationship or such. But we're always trying to keep doors open, and as we're investing in that broader digital B2B industrial space, so there are always other conversations that we can have, even if maybe Datch isn't the right it's not the right use case for the customer. Potentially, there are other things that we can offer, I believe, but we're not we're not cutthroat. We will let people also have their time used the way they want it.
Right.
Yeah.
And as we kind of wrap up here and conclude, I'd love to hear what's next on the journey for Datch and for Blue Bear. What are the plans? Maybe in the next 6 months, in the next 2 years.
Yeah, there's where should I start? As you're always trying to fit in 5 years of timeline into about 1 to 2 years, but for us it's towards a platform play. So there's one of the great things about what team has developed. We are adaptable across different processes. Now that's a really hard thing to achieve, and what's even harder is to do that in a very low touch way, so that you can go in and plug in. So you just speaking to that system, getting that to a really low touch integration, one button integration. That is really the next step for us. We have various levels. We have various parts of that built out, but really what we want to have is a really highly scalable version of Datch, and really just so it helps us be able to bring in customers without having to scale resources too intensely on our end. Really it's about this consolidated push towards getting that platform up and running, so that we can just keep bringing in customers from the moment they sign up and deliver on that value from day one.
Great. And Carolyn, from your side, how much time are you spending during COVID allocating towards your portfolio, companies like Datch, and looking at new deals? Has the paradigm shifted?
We're just working more, since we're all working from home and we don't have to spend time at airports, airplanes, and so the day can begin earlier and start and end later. No, just kidding. I think we're all on supporting our portfolio companies. We have 14 companies in our portfolio right now, and really making the most of their growth during COVID and being prepared for whatever change is coming. We only know that there's going to be more change coming. But we're actively investing. So I'd say like maybe 50-50, maybe 60% on portfolio and 40% new deals. And then building the network. I think we want to drive that change that I talked about initially and support all the players in the market being successful through the transition, not just on the energy side, but working remotely, enabling people to be out in the field while not having to have that much contact, being as efficiently as possible with digital technologies out there for that transition. So we're rolling up our sleeves even more, and if you're interested in being part of that or want to learn more, feel free to reach out now or anytime after this event.
Great. Well, I think we're running up on time here, but it was great talking with you guys today. I believe Mark and Carolyn will both be at the Remo networking tables after the final panel. So please stick around and connect with them in person after we conclude.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so now we'll have a fireside chat between Mohit Garg, the CEO and co-founder of Oloid, and Fritz Wechnig, who works for Flex. And welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks.
And maybe we'll start with Mohit. Let's hear, what is Oloid?
Yeah, so I'll take everybody through quick. slides as an overview. So Oloid is a computer vision platform for workplace safety and security. And for us, the value proposition is primarily around security. And with COVID, we've added value propositions around safety at the workplace with computer vision-based temperature checks and QR code-based wellness attestations where employees and visitors can talk about their symptoms and travel history, and it's cameras or standard tablets. And the core offering continues to be very strong around facial authentication-based access control, opening doors turnstiles, operating time clocks. And we do this with integration with existing infrastructure, whether it's the HRIS systems, payroll systems, existing access control systems. Our system works as an app on tablets, or it can work with standard IP cameras. And we're essentially helping our customers go through a maturity model of workplace safety and security where they may have a non-integrated system to begin with, but eventually we want all the safety paradigm to be part of the day of the life of worker. So when an employee is clocking in, they should be able to establish their wellness and the fact that they're not a contagion risk for their coworkers or they're accessing doors and turnstiles. At that time, that safety check should be established as a seamless step in the process. So we're based in Sunnyvale, work with more than 600 customers across manufacturing, construction, supply chain, and healthcare industry. And Flex is featured as one of our very prized customers, and we've had a long partnership with Fritz and his team. So really excited to be here and sharing our story.
Great, thank you. And Fritz, could you please share a little bit about your role at Flex and what is Flex for some of the audience members that might not know?
Sure. Actually, it's funny because Flex is pretty much well known here in the Bay Area, but not outside of the world, right? So my name, as I said, is Friedrich Wetschnick, but everyone calls me Fritz. I'm the CISO, but also now I'm leading a larger part of IT. That's the reason why I'm VP of Enterprise Information Technology, what we call it. It's networking, IT governance, help desk. So global license management is part of my portfolio I'm responsible for. I'm with the company a long time, past in January my 20 years. So that's I would say the most crazy years I ever experienced, and I experienced some crazy years, but that's with COVID is one of, I think, the most challenging years we have ever seen in our life. And yeah, so I started a long time ago as an engineer and switched to security actually very early stage in my career, like 2 years in as a system engineer. I got actually had a bad experience. I saw how people hacked into our system. And then I thought, okay, this is interesting. How did they bypass me? How did they figure that out? So I got really drawn into security. And now managing over 300 people, and it always comes with new challenges. So yeah, that's about me. Flex is an electronic manufacturing service company, supply chain company. We have around now 180,000 people across the world. We have over 100 factories in 30 plus countries. And we have two big reliability and agility groups, which is like we produce like healthcare was a big thing, right? If you think about at the COVID crisis, ventilators was an issue. So we jumped on with our partners on this one, for example, and within 8 weeks, we were able to start producing ventilators for one of our customers, medical customers. Those are the things we are doing across different sectors like automotive, cloud, and those things. Yeah, so that's Flex in general.
Great. And part of Flex's strategy is to innovate with startups. Can you please share Flex's approach to working with startups?
Yes, I can. So it started actually when I took the CISO role, which is 6 years. So I'm a long-term survivor as a CISO. And it's interesting because I had as all you guys maybe experienced the same thing from an enterprise company. I was a bit frustrated with the large vendors, right? Because I think the ability to listen to customers and also to start thinking is like, this is not working as it's supposed to be. The world has changed and we need to innovate and address the problems differently. I mean, it's always hard for a big company to do this change, right? And I think that's where I got frustrated as a CISO when I took over. So I started as personal reason also and say, okay, I have this business problems, and it always starts with, I have a problem, right? I'm not interested in technology for the sake of technology. I need to understand where my challenges are, or my challenges could be, and I say, okay, is any one of my current existing vendors addressing, are they moving into the right direction with the roadmap, or do I see an issue with that? And that's what the start of it, right? And we start engaging with startups when I moved here a lot more than we ever did before. That was also driven by my CIO, Shaheen, who is actually also saying, I want to break up the narrow, right? I want not just stay with these big companies, and I want to really go innovative as we think we have to. We're innovating the manufacturing, like with automation and other stuff. So we have to do the same with IT. And we broke up some narrative in this one. 2 years ago, actually, and that was Mohit was one of the first who actually had to suffer a little bit because of that, because we just started the program. We hired a senior director in a position for IT to build up a program for partnerships. So we actually actively going out to VCs and say, hey, we have these problems. Do you have any company in this portfolio which might be interesting for us to help us to solve this problem, right? So really actively engaging with a large set of companies. That one from like personal and how we did it before to a really strategic program now, where we do have follow-ups, where we actually do POCs, where we say we're interested, we give feedback to the companies, why we think this company is not the right fit for us. And I think that worked out well. I remember the first pitch with Mohit was completely different what he did a couple of minutes ago. So completely different, right? And I think that was a learning factor for me as well, is when we started the partnership, we both had to develop and evolve over the years, right? And think about differently. And I think that was the most interesting learning factor for me during the last 2 years, actually.
It's been a pleasure, Fritz.
And Mohit, I'd love to hear, from your side about the journey from first point of contact to proof of concept and to where you guys are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Fritz laid a very good foundation for this question. So right from the first touch point, we were just getting started. And honestly, we had very little of product built up, but we had some ideas primarily around physical identity. And that's where the initial meeting with Gus Shaheen, the CIO of Flex, and then later with Fritz, it started to frame around the problems that we could help Flex with. And we started looking at computer vision based, because our team was a very strong computer vision AI team. We started mapping the manufacturing process, how we could assist with safety around emergency door exit monitoring with computer vision and cameras. And what it got down to is, can we identify something which has an immediate return? There were some opportunities which were around automating the time clocking process. How can you introduce higher identity assurance? How can you improve security? And we started building the solution in close partnership with Fritz and his team. And we had POCs initially in Milpitas, California, later on in other facilities in Mexico. And this was a partnership where over a period of more than a year, we went through multiple iterations of the product, had cycles of feedback, we had monthly check-ins. So one thing I will call out is, of all our customers, the cadence that we've had with Fritz and his team, it has been remarkable. He has given us so much support with giving us constant opportunity to voice wherever we thought things were slowing down or we needed support, and he and his team have stepped in along the way. And then this year, once COVID came in, we already had a facial authentication-based solution, which was very robust. We had implemented time clocking at multiple factories, more than a dozen factories already with Flex. And then we had to make them contactless. So whereas earlier one would come and push a button on the tablet, we had to work with Flex and make this whole experience as a completely contactless experience for the employees. And now we're working on how to integrate the thermal computer vision solution where during clocking or turnstile access, the employee's thermal footprint would also be checked at the time for elevated skin temperature. So yeah, it's been a 18-month-long journey where we have had such a great partnership. We've learned so much through the process. We've had tremendous executive support, and all the way to the implementation, to the site supervisors and IT team. So yeah, we couldn't have asked for a better early stage partner, and it's been a very rewarding experience for us. Very thankful to Flex and the team.
Right. And now we have a question from the audience. You mentioned that you had to hire someone to specifically manage the engagements with startups. Do you think that was a key factor in having successful pilots?
No, I don't think so. I want to clarify the role a bit about that, right? So I think what you as a startup only have to think about when you build your relationships, if you think about the word now, everyone builds relationship with the CISOs and CIOs, right? And think at some point you get passed to the technical team, right? So I don't do a technical decision. I think there's a misunderstanding I have seen along the cross with a lot of, when I work with startups across the road. The point for successful POC is more that I have a very solid, robust project management. I set the clear expectations, which means we said, okay, we spent 40 hours for the proof of concept. This is the value is what we are going to charge you on it. And that's what we're going to, from a technical perspective, going to do it. There's a lot of more going into what a strategic partnership help was. That's a technical thing to do. Now we have to think as startup is, how is the management team doing, right? So we have a criteria where we're doing diligence. What is the funding, right? Who is the funding VCs behind them? Do we believe they can survive, right? Because I always take a risk when I go with a startup as a large enterprise that maybe in a year, 2 years, or 3 years, they are gone, right? They couldn't survive. So all the investments I did for the last 3 years are gone out of it's gone, right? So what you do, and then afterwards, when I say, okay, I don't have a solution, or I have a solution implemented, but nobody is able to support that anymore. So that's where the strategic person, Samira, comes in place and really is doing a great job. She makes sure we understand all the risk, right? And then contractually, how we could address them and how we work them and make sure we monitor those situations. But the technical piece, it's not about that. The technical piece is really that you as a startup says, okay, you force the company and says, hey, what is your expectation on us, right? How much time are you going to spend on the proof of value? Who is be the key partners? What is your criteria that you would charge me on, right? And let's agree on that before we go into a proof of value, right? With Mohit in the early stage, it's also a little bit different because we had to learn the first vision we had to address it dramatically over the time, right? So I would say the proof of value was to prove out two things when we did it is the idea is working what they had, right? So we say, hey, yeah, you showed us that you actually could detect an object or you could do a facial recognition and you can deliver on a computer vision process, right, for physical security. And the second thing is for me was important, how quick I would have the confidence the team can address things, right? If we come up and say, how is your technical background that I know you can deliver a product or product feature, which I think it's then really critical for the success of the story, right? And that's the two things we learned during our proof of value. As he said, there was not a product there yet, right? But then startups are different stages, right? If you're in stage B, funding a stage B or C, D round, I'm expecting already the product way different than you're in a very early stage where you're in a seed investment, right? So that's a learning factor we figured out with the program is expectation being set has to be different at the stage where the company is.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing. And then, Mohit, we'd love to know, how has Oloid adapted in this post-COVID world, and what are some of the key changes? We heard you allude a little bit to the thermal scanners, but would love to hear a little bit more about any pivots you guys have made.
Yeah, absolutely, Taylor. And I would elevate my answer to talk about, in general, how I've seen my peers and other startups adapt to COVID times. And it's been about listening very intently to how the priorities of the customers have changed. So I'll be honest with you, our discussions up until January were primarily around improving security and identity assurance. If somebody carries a badge, then we're verifying the badge, not the person. And our technology helped the organization verify biometrically, contactless way that this is that person indeed. But listening to our customers from February, March, the concerns were around how do I get my employees safely into the workplace? How do I reopen? How do I have a roadmap where my employees have the confidence that this workplace is doing adequate measures to ensure safety? So the conversation started to veer more towards safety than security, which was our original pitch. So we had to combine the two value propositions. And thankfully, our computer vision technology allowed for that combination. So the product had to adapt. We were the earliest companies to start procuring thermal hardware in February. And as a result, we could do lab testing in March, April, and get a product out in a very short period of time. That's because we anticipated where the market was going based on what our customers were demanding. So in summary, I would say it's been a twofold adaptation for us. One is quickly changing the messaging and adapting to what's relevant for the current times. And second is enhancing the product while keeping the core value proposition, because ultimately what we've implemented with thermal cameras is a feature in the product. It's not the core platform itself. It's a capability in the platform. And the platform has to stay relevant even beyond when contagion checks will not be required, hopefully soon. So it's about not losing focus on the long-term vision, but making sure in the near term, our features and messaging and go-to-market is aligning with customers' priorities.
Right. And thank you very much. So Fritz, I'd love to hear, you mentioned 180,000 person company. What are your plans to expand with Oloid down the road, if you guys have thought that far down, and to continue working with startups as well?
We actually did. See, that's a new life now. Your daughter is in the back. It's fine. I think, look, we just signed an agreement with us to expand here in North America and Mexico. I think that's the start of a relationship to really expand. I know. I think that's where we had to learn both sides. There's a lot of, we are a big enterprise company, and it took us a while to get to this point to finalize that. And I think it's kind of a frustration sometimes, right? Because we can't move as quickly as we sometimes want to. As a big company, we are low margin business. So that's always comes in point as well, right? My budget is always tight. We run a business at 3.7%, 4%, we want 5% OP. So it's very little actually compared to software companies. So we're expanding, right? I mean, that's the concept. I think the challenges down the road when we want to be globalizing ourselves, it will be GDPR, right? And the requirements for biometrics in Europe is going to be a challenge, right? And then the Asia market, it's more on I would say I take China out of this equation because I think there's a different strategy we have for China. I think that's what comes in place now for a lot of startups is, right, where you expand your market and where you're going as first internationally as well, right? So, but yeah, it's a growing partnership. It's definitely growing, and it's not like I see it expanding because touchless it was actually before COVID, to be honest, right? I think the vision is for me was always going passwordless. I want to get rid of passwords as much as I can. I think it's more convenient for the user. The only thing you really have to stick on it's privacy, and you have to be very clear and transparent to your employees what you're using the data for. I think that's the one thing I really learned. I'm transparent. I don't need to dance around this one. I said, this is what we use the data for. And then you have to make sure this is really what you're committing to, right? So, but yeah, it's an expanding relationship. During the COVID crisis, it took us a while. And now I think everyone is looking forward now to get it going forward with it. I mean, I get really, really good. The users are really happy with the solution, right? I mean, for them, it makes their life easier. I mean, that's a simplification for the users and for the employees. I think it's an important part as well.
Right. And then as we wrap up here, Mohit, I'd love to hear your plan for expansion as well in the next 6 months, in 2 years, in 5 years.
Yeah, certainly, Taylor, and I apologize for that brief interruption. My daughter walked into the room. I believe startups grow in arcs, and we believe Oloid has successfully completed its first arc of growth, where we worked with our very intimate anchor customers and build the product. This is a time where our second arc has to be around go-to-market, where we can replicate that success with a much larger set of customers and show how we can acquire customers at scale at an acquisition cost, which gives a very strong payback period to our customers and also very strong financial ratios to our investors. So I think in the second arc over the next 2 years, we will demonstrate how this becomes a model where our platform would be used by several hundreds and potentially thousands of organizations, show how we can scale up the team on the go-to-market side. So far, it's been an R&D team primarily, and we're starting to hire on go-to-market functions. And then the third arc would be late-stage growth, which is a couple of years down for us. But I think for us, the focus is how can we build the successes we've had with anchor customers like Flex, the strong endorsement we have from the users, and then use that as a basis to open more doors, get into more POCs and customer contracts, and show that this is a scalable business which can be a several $1 billion of revenue business in the next few years.
Great. So I think we've run out of time now, but I believe Mohit and Fritz will be at the networking tables at the end of the event. So please stick around and talk to them after we conclude here. But thank you so much for participating on our panel. It's a great discussion and look forward to watching you grow.
Thank you. Great chatting with you. And thank you, Fritz, for joining.
And without further ado, I'll pass it back to Sean.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Taylor, and thank you to everyone who presented with us today. I greatly appreciate it. It was very informational for myself as well as I'm sure everyone in the audience. But yeah, so right now we're going to dive into our networking session. Just really quickly want to run over some rules. So at the tables where we first started this webinar, you're going to be able to sort of meet up and network with people up to 6 at each individual table. And then on the next slide, this is sort of the layout of what you're going to be seeing. For any technical issues, we have a Remo support table on the right-hand side, as well as a break table on the right-hand side as well. However, when you are networking, please, please, please keep your camera and microphone on. We really want this to be the best experience as possible for everyone networking. Additionally, we also have a way that you can update your profile. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can click on your profile. You can include your company name, your LinkedIn, and anything that will sort of give other people more information about who you are and what you do. And if you hover over people's names, you'll be able to sort of see this information that you update. And then lastly, there's 2 different views. And so on the left-hand side, we have the tile view in which it'll enlarge everyone's faces at each table, or you can go into the table view, which is probably what most of you guys had when you first joined the webinar. And then on the next slide, I guess that's it. But yeah, so that's all. If you guys need any help, please feel free to reach out to anyone with the plug and play title in their header. But yeah, for now, I'll let you guys network. And yeah, thank you all for joining.